answer here to 8 and 9. So what's the market clearing price going to be? $19. So all you did was set the supply equation and the demand equation equal to each other. Okay, so if the market is allowed to move, they will end up here at $19. What this question then says, what 9 says is, what if the government says you're not allowed to sell it for 19? You are not allowed to sell it for less than 30. It's called a price floor. And, or they didn't have to do that. They could just say, hey, milk producers, you can sell it to us at $30. And so if the market price is less than that, they won't sell it to the market, they'll just sell it to the government, okay? But if the government says, oh yeah, we'll put it up here at $30, okay? Now I'm going to have too much supply, I'm going to have more supply than demand. We call that a surplus, right? So when all you do there is you plug in $30 into both equations, and you're going to get that demand at $30 is 40 units, but 95 units are going to be supplied. So 95 minus 40 is there's going to be a surplus of 55 units, and the government's paying for those at $30 a piece, and so that's $1,650. Okay? So this is when they say, hey, milk producers, dairy farmers, we will buy all of your milk at whatever price, and it's higher than the market clearing price, then the government, they end up buying all that milk, and what do they do with that milk? They turn it to cheese, and that's the government cheese in factories that they sell to schools. Okay, so, true story. So that's 8 and 9. Okay, number 10. Number 10, the intuition on number 10 that you might need, it's been a while since we've thought about elasticity, but remember that elasticity, the idea behind it and the actual algebraic formula is by changing quantity percentage over change in price percentage. But really what we think about is, if I change my price by 10%, by how much will my sales fall off? Okay? So if, in this case it's -2, so that means if I increase price by 10%, by how much will sales decrease? Okay, I will sell 20% fewer units. Okay? So what is going to happen to my net revenue? Is it going to increase or decrease? Okay, it's going to decrease. Okay? So the answer to 10 is decrease. It's A. Now, this is always going to be negative. Why? Okay, that's that law of demand we talked about back here. Okay? And because these two things always move opposite, we often think about, so I'm going to use epsilon here. We use epsilon for elasticity. The absolute value of it, it hinges at 1. If we are at 1, then we call that unitary elasticity, or it's unitary elastic. It also means we are at the revenue maximizing price. Okay? If we are in the, if it is greater than 1, the absolute value is greater than 1, okay, then we are in the price sensitive range. Meaning if I raise it by a little bit, sales more than, like, it's sort of elastic, it stretches, it more than offsets it. So we call that, this is the elastic range, which means price sensitive. That's the way I think of it. And the reason I do it that way is because if it's less than 1, it is inelastic, which means people are price insensitive. Right? And so The classic example is something like insulin, that even though they raised the price of insulin, which they've been doing like crazy the last 3 years, if you're diabetic, you still need it, so you're still willing to pay for it, okay? If you can. Okay. Questions on this so far? Okay. So, 11, I'm also going to have you work out with your neighbor. Sorry to make you do work. So 11, I give you that it is, you've got this formula here, quantity of x is 12 minus 3px plus 4py. Remember that the elasticity, if we use the calculus way, is I'm taking the derivative with respect to my own price, and then I'm doing it as p of x over q of x. And then remember, the cross price elasticity is I'm taking the derivative with respect to py. And I've got py, q of x. So the question only asks for own price. With your neighbor, go ahead and calculate own price and cross price given the facts I give you in 11. This will be one of the last times you can work on this with your neighbor. So go ahead and, given the facts that I give in question 11, go ahead and solve for the own price and cross price. Okay, so the first thing I do when doing an own price and a cross price is I solve for a quantity. So I just go ahead and plug in whatever numbers they've given me to go ahead and to find my quantity here. So I've got this is going to be 12 minus 3 times, what is it, 2? Plus 4 times 1. I've done this 4 times today. You would think I would have these numbers memorized by now, but I don't. So anyway, when you add 12 minus 6 plus 4, that's 10. Okay, so own price. Derivative with respect to px is just negative 3 in this case. Okay, times, I'm not going to make it quite, so I've got negative 3. Okay, and then the price is $2 and quantity is 10. So that's negative 0.6. Okay, cross price. Derivative with respect to py is 4, so it's just positive 4. Okay, quantity is the same, it's that still 10, and then this price is $1, so this is equal to positive 0.4. Okay. Sorry. I only asked you, the question asked for this negative 0.6, so the answer to that one is E. Okay? The interpretation on cross price here, remember cross price hinges at 0. Okay? This says if Pepsi increases their price by 1%, my sales will increase by 0.4 of 1%. Does that make sense? So now, is this a substitute or complement? It's a substitute, and the way I remember that is a substitute just means if this good increases their price, what am I predicting will happen to my sales? They will increase. Okay, so then I'm like, oh, this is like a Pepsi. This is if I increase the price of Pepsi, some people are going to substitute away from Pepsi and buy Coke, which means sales for Coke are going to increase. So that's the way I remember that. If it's positive, it's a substitute. If it's negative, it's a complement.
And that's for cross price?
Correct.
So if cross price is positive, then it's...
Actually, so this is the actual cross price. You can tell if it's a substitute or complement. You don't have to go through that whole thing. You just have to look at the coefficient. And that's because price is always going to be positive. Quantity is always going to be positive. So this term, positive divided by positive, it'll always be positive. So sign of this term will be determined by that guy right there, which is that guy. Okay. Yeah?
Is this going to be on the final as well?
No. How does that change your studying? No, I'm kidding. Because that means I know after next week it'll be hard drive will just leak that out. We don't need that. I'm kidding, right? Yeah, no. Final's not cumulative. So, okay, how are we on time? Yeah.
Which number is positive and negative that determines if it's a substitute or complement?
The sign on that coefficient right there.
On the PY?
Uh-huh.
So if the PY is positive, it's a substitute. If the PY is negative, it's a complement.
Right. Where am I at? Oh, 12. Okay. 12. The intuition on 12 comes down to, I'm going to refer back to this guy, to 10. The intuition here by 20%, you calculate this number, and then you tell me about what's going to happen with revenue, that sort of thing. Okay? But you could also imagine that for this to hold true, so I've got 3 numbers here. If I give you any 2 of them, you can find the third. So up till now, I've given you these 2 and asked you to find this. What this question, the next question is going to do is say, I'm going to give you these 2 and ask you to find this guy. Okay? That's the only, I mean, that's not tricky, but that's what it's asking for, right? So, 12, or not 12, yeah, 12 says, own price elasticity for apples is, so I've got this change in quantity percentage over change in price percentage. And I'm saying this is equal to negative 1.2. Okay. And then this guy is negative 5%. So what value for this change in quantity makes that guy true? Okay, what is it? 6%. Okay, positive 6%. The way you got that is negative 1.2 times negative 5 equals positive 6. And that's why the answer to 12 is it will increase 6%. Okay, 13. Good, we're making good time. 13 says, if the cross price elasticity between good A and good B is negative, then we know these goods are complements, okay? So we know they're not substitutes. I haven't told you anything about, inelastic refers to own price, not cross price, okay? And then I need something else to fill it in, okay? What's an inferior good? Does anybody remember? Brody?
Good where when your income increases, the quantity demanded decreases.
That's right. So this goes back to here. Normally we assume for most things, if I make more money, you know, I buy more steak. These are things that as I get more money, I buy less of, and so they're things like ramen noodles. There aren't very many goods, but the goods for which that is true, we call those inferior goods. Okay, now 14 says cross price elasticity. So what do I assume the cross price between ketchup and hamburgers is going to be? Okay, well, right, it'll be high. Are these substitutes or complements? Complements, which means they're going to be negative, at negative 1.2. Okay, so a 4% increase in the price of ketchup. Have I told you anything about own price elasticity of ketchup in that question? No, I haven't. So that's why you can cross out A and C, any answers that talk about what's going to happen to demand or quantity demanded for ketchup. Okay, so what's the answer there? The answer is B. It's a 4.8% drop in quantity of hamburgers. Yeah.
If you had as an option on that, it would be a 4% decrease. If it said that we, oh, never mind, I just answered my question.
Okay. Now 15 is another one that's, the wording is a little bit, I don't know, it's a lot awkward. Okay? So I say assume the price of pork chops falls from 8 to 6. This will lead to an increase in demand for applesauce from 100 to 140, and the opposite is true. So what I'm going to ask you to calculate it is what happens when pork chops price increases from 6 to 8. What's the cross price elasticity? Turns out going from 8 to 6 and 6 to 8, you'll calculate different cross price elasticities because 6 to 8 is a 33% increase, right? Going from 8 to 6 is a what percent decrease? 25%. Okay, so it matters the direction that we're going. So with your neighbor, so what this means is, in this case, I've got the price of pork chops. Now, I don't know why pork chops and applesauce go together, but
They taste really good together.
do they? Okay, so there we go. So I've got price of pork chops goes from 6 to 8. Okay, and so quantity of applesauce is going to go from, it's going to go from 140 down to 100. So you want to remember new minus old divided by old. Right? New minus old divided by old. So with your neighbor, go ahead and calculate the cross price elasticity. Pork chops going 6 to 8, applesauce going from 140 down to 100. Okay, so
I need to write that down.
I think so you just have to remember what's new and what's old on that, right? So if I'm going from 140 to 100, this is going to be my new, right? And that's my old. Same thing here. So in this case, new minus old divided by old, I'm going from, 100 minus 140 from a base of 140, new minus old divided by old, which equals, I've got a decline of 40 units from a base of 140. Okay, and then down here on price, I've got a 33.3% increase, right? I'm increasing by 2 units from a base of 6, but new minus old divided by old, so that's 8 minus 6 from base of 6, which is the same thing as 2 divided by 6. Okay, so that means we're going to get a, this guy is negative 28.5%. And this guy is a positive 33.3%. Okay, and so when you put it all together, you get a negative 0.857. I even needed that little square before, that's why I have it there. But, or negative 0.86, which is why the answer is, what is it, D?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Now, if you got your new minus old reversed, you would get the negative 1.6, which is answer A. So if you got negative 1 point, yeah, I know which one's the most commonly missed. So if you got that flipped, if you got it wrong, if you got negative 1.6, that's why. Okay, so you always want to focus. I mean, I think it's intuitively to say, look, I've got a decrease of 140, or a decrease of 40 from a base of 140, and an increase in 2 from a base of 6. You can do that, or new minus old divided by old, new minus old divided by old. Okay? Yeah.
So because it's negative 0.86, that just means it's very.
It means that they are
Complement.
complements, yeah, and the further away they get from 0, the bigger the teeter-totter effect is, the bigger the swing that they cause.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is a relatively big